rather than getting a bunch of details, that was the reason it could not be used for ribs. But it had to be purchased that way because one of the others belonged to the same person, and they would not sell one without the other. They were adjacent to one another, and so for us to get all the property we needed for the ribs, we had to also purchase this other 20 acres there. We didn't know in the very beginning that it couldn't be used for ribs until the soil borings and hydraulic analysis come back and indicated that to us. So we ended up with that 20 acres there and whenever we talked about a firing range, then it was brought before you several months ago to be considered for that use. We're in the process right now of working on the plans. We have all the survey and topo was completed not long ago, and so I don't know why this property wasn't annexed back in 2008 when it was all purchased. I can't answer that question. Neither can I answer the question why that property up there by Old Spanish Trail wasn't annexed. Mm-hmm. We've owned that for many, many years. But it still belongs to the city. It's still in the property records as belonging to us. We bought it. We have clear title to it, but it was never annexed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other comments?
Couple more.
Go ahead. You still on the floor?
I'm seeing that the total cost for both of these sites is $10,250.
Those are direct cost only, Mr. Fairclough.
Excuse me?
Those are direct cost only.
And so I'm looking further. It says request for direction from council as to the funding of the project. So that money is not already allocated in your budget?
No, sir, it is not.
Or anybody else's budget?
Or anybody else's
What's
budget.
the benefit of spending $10,000 to annex it?
Well, if it's not in the city, you have no jurisdiction in how or if a shooting range can be built on that property.
Is there a federal or state requirement that would not allow it if we didn't?
I have no idea, but you will have no say so in the permitting or the final decision of what the development would be or what it would be required. You will be building under Okaloosa County's permitting and review process.
What would they charge us?
I have no idea, sir. I do know that they have transportation fees, whereas the city of Crestview has waived theirs. So they could charge all their impact fees, their permitting fees, their development review fees will all be payable to Okaloosa County.
And this $10,250, that would be paid for advertising and so forth?
That is direct cost. That is directly for the cost of advertising, and the amendment prices are for the filing of comp plan amendments with the state.
So we would still have to pay that if it was under the county? At least that, because they're going to have to advertise it too, aren't they?
Their advertisement may be different. They will not be filing a comp plan. You've got it. It's listed under here as mixed use. You will have to demonstrate mixed use of the property, and at that time have your development plan reviewed and follow their guidelines.
Well, I've got no opposition to annex it. It's just that if we don't need to spend $10,000, I can't see spending it.
Well, when the shooting range come up, the board asked that I present what it would cost to annex, and that's what I'm doing, presenting you what it will cost to annex and bring it under the city's jurisdiction, comprehensive plan, and zoning map. There is another question on this property. We have been approached by an attorney for the property owners to the east. They are requiring a right-of-way in order to reach their property, and their present entranceway crosses this property diagonally. So there is an open issue there that we're going to have to handle. But that is over and above what we're here presenting tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, Ms. Booker.
Teresa, I was told several weeks ago that that property was the city's property. Is there a established deed on that property now? If so, who is that deed made out to?
And the city of Crestview.
The city of Crestview.
Yes, sir. We have a deed there for approximately 100 acres of land,
That's what I
and
understand.
including the rights of way of the 3 MC Lane and Retta Lane. There is an easement across what is known of Friendship Lane, but we do not have any title to that.
None whatsoever.
No, sir. Only an easement to access it. So.
From that.
We're gonna be faced with that problem about the right of ingress and egress, no matter where we annex it or not.
That's what my
Right.
question was
Because
fixing to be to
we're the
you.
owners- We're the owners of the property. They're trying to work something out with us, and if they can't work it out, then they'll go to court. Under state
Right.
statute, you're entitled to ingress and egress to your property if you're locked in and can't get out any other way.
So basically what I'm hearing and what I did some research, unless we annex that property in, we're gonna be doing a domino effect down the road.
Well, it depends on what you're going to utilize the property for, and how we plan to settle the right-of-way issues with Mr. Vados and his other property owners.
But I just don't want to go and see the city have to allocate $4 or $5, well, let me rephrase that, $500,000 that this annexation would cost us, and we don't want that to happen.
Mr. Blocker, it would be $10,250
On
to
the
annex
annexation process.
all of it. The
All
annex,
right,
3
totally.
phases of it. 3 phases.
That's right.
You would have your jurisdiction into the city limits. You would have your comprehensive plan, a small scale and a conventional, and you would have the rezoning of both properties.
But whatever's necessary, I want to let's make sure and do what's necessary so we can utilize and get the benefit of that 20 acres that we need for the forest range.
Well, this.
So we got this, can we do this in steps, 1, 2, or 3, or should it all be done at once?
The most cost-efficient way is to proceed with it all at one time. The
Agreed.
annexation would be for the entire 100 acres and the majority of the roadway, and the 2.7 acres by Spanish Trail Park. That's the reason the direct cost is only $18.50 for your advertisements and your public notices, because all of the property is contained into one. You would not need, if you phased it, say in 20-acre phases, you would have to have advertising and public notices for each phase. And it would be almost this amount of money for each phase that you do. So we can do the whole complete amount of land at one time, for this is the most efficient way that I can do it.
Well, I'd just like to refer back to our counselor. At this time, Mr. Holly, what would be, I know I said just a recommendation, that you would recommend it in what area and what move do the city need to do on this?
Well, I don't see any reason not to annex it. I'm concerned about this request for ingress and egress easement, and it may, if we don't agree on something, and it goes to court, the judge will be the one that determines what it is.
Right.
And he could put it in an area that jeopardizes the shooting range, I don't, because we don't have anything on it right now.
Yes, sir. In reflection to the request for an easement, the 3 across your so that you can tell where I'm talking about. This is your 3M.
Right.
This is Friendship Lane, which you have title to part of it, and you have an easement across it, perpetual easement. You could actually utilize. And in studying this property here, the most efficient way for this property to obtain access would be through Friendship Lane via contacting this property owner here, who is not the city, to cross over to the uplands of this. This property is, the eastern portion is complete wetlands of Mr. Bados's property. So
Okay.
the only portion that is able to be reached will be the uplands of that. Right now, they're diagonally across, which interrupts the best use of the property by the city. And that is a right that we can stand on. They can't destroy the best use of our property. So there is some wetlands along the south line, and there is other properties at which they could perceivably receive access ways.
You can hang on just a minute. I'd like to get an input from Mr. Steele, if you would, please.
What I was going to say is, I've been in conversation with those property owners, and see, it's part of our long-range plan to extend the MC3 lane all the way across,
Right.
all the way through to join up with Redstone. Not Redstone, well, West Redstone, but it's Physicians Drive. And they were willing to give us easement and right-of-way, whatever we needed then, when I talked to them about that in the future, because they're currently landlocked. And if we continue with that, the way our long-range plan shows, that right-of-way, that alignment of corridor that lines up with MC3 lane, then it would provide those property owners access to the property.
Right.
In other words, we thought about this a while ago, and I don't think there's really no issue, in my opinion, that because right now they're coming up there and they're going around the property basically to get to theirs. But so I'm not aware of any roads, or currently any roads or trails that's going through that 20 acres. Any roads or trails or anybody using anything like that. We're maintaining most of that out there right now because it's city right-of-way. It was county right-of-way. County gave it to us and it became city right-of-way. So I don't know if right-of-way has to be annexed or how that works or not. But whenever we were acquiring that property, I contacted the county and asked them. They just said, we'll give you that. It's county right-of-way because we were going to use it for ribs. And then in our long-range plan, we want to extend that road all the way through to Physicians Lane to tie in over there on West Redstone. So we talked with those property owners, and I've talked with the recent landowner that's bought all of this out there just in the last 3 or 4 months. So they're willing to work with us. It's not an issue of dire straits.
Well, they have an attorney and they're threatening to sue us for right of way.
Well, I haven't seen.
And and the law says that they're entitled to the most practical way out.
Yep.
If they're landlocked.
The most practical way being is what we just discussed. At the end of 3MC Lane, is when 3MC Lane terminates, it is immediately joined by what they're commonly call Friendship Lane. It's not a true right-of-way. It's just an access that those property owners have come up with. They're utilizing it as a right-of-way now. It will not be difficult for the city to either acquire it or petition for the right-of-way to run adjacent to the north line of this 20 acres. There is a wetland section at the very most eastern corner of the 20 acres, so we may have to do a little circle around if we want, in our aim and goal, to reach Physicians Lane. But that road would be the best access for the property owners that are petitioning for it.
Yes, Ms. Bull.
Another follow-up now. I'll ask Chief Taylor. Will that 20 acres develop the facilities that you need for your range?
Absolutely. We're currently, as Mr. Steele said earlier, we're currently drawing the plans up for the whole training center out there, and the 20 acres is
Sufficient.
It's plenty.
I want to make sure it is. Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. President.
And through the aerials, you can clearly see a diagonal roadway across the property.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. What I'm looking at here, we've already authorized to have the firing range and everything put out there. And the other piece of property by the park, which I never know, I won't know why we didn't get that in the city. But the county tells us what to do on that right now, basically. The question is, though, the money. They want to know where we get the money from. That's what the question was. Request for directions from council as to the funding of the project. And with that being said, I don't have to go to our clerk. Madam Clerk, well, I know we have the contingency funds. Do we have another fund?
No, it would have to come out of your contingency.
And at the present time, we have how much in contingency?
About, minus the cars we've had to buy, probably about 1.2 million. I don't have the exact number.
Okay, I think we have sufficient funds to do that, and I think it's worth the cost.
Mr. President, I don't think it's a cut and dried on that right-of-way issue. We're supposed to have a phone conversation with them sometime in
Yes.
the near future, but
Near future.
But the law, the statute clearly says the most practical way out. Now, how a judge determine which is the most practical way is determined where he says.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Hicks.
to that matter, what we're discussing, they want to know which way to go and where the funds are coming from. Since we established that we do have the funds, now the legal aspect of it, that's what our attorneys are looking to, because this is going to take, they're not going to do it like tomorrow.
No, sir, we will be in conversation with them sometime either next week or the first week in June. I have pulled the existing topographic map that I had and calculated out the right-of-ways according to the topography that would work. I've also researched the right-of-way that exists to the north of the parcel, and that would probably be your most adequate way to go. Mr. Steele, did you say you actually had a current survey?
Yes.
A current
And
survey?
I have a current survey, and I'm telling you, I've been out there many, many times. That diagonal road she's talking about goes across the very, very corner. Not even it ain't I bet you it's not 200 foot at the very most that it's encroaching into that parcel. It's right on that corner. And if that's all they need, that's fine. If they want to keep the road where it currently is, that wouldn't impact this project at all. You're not talking about something that's going across the middle of the 20 acres or anything like that. It's right on the very, it's the what you call it, the northwest corner. And there's nothing out there on that parcel, no roads or anything that anyone is accessing any properties from. It goes almost around the edge of it and turns and goes along the, like Teresa said, it's at that portion of it, it turns and it becomes Friendship Lane, they call it. But it's I'm familiar with those property owners out there, and I'm out there, and I've been out there quite a bit in the last few years.
We may need to get you involved in this with these property owners since you're familiar with them.
Yeah,
Yes.
And
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Teresa's been saying it cut across the middle of it, but you're saying it
No,
goes
sir.
across the corner.
it's across the very corner. It's like I said, about maybe 150 feet. If I could, gonna guess at it.
And I think we need to get that talk going on as soon as possible. If not, you go ahead and file. a
We
lawsuit.
have a current survey, boundary and topo.
Could you
Brand
provide
new.
that for us, and so that I can provide it for the attorney?
Absolutely.
I think what I'm hearing, Teresa, consensus of this is council is that, what I'm hearing anyway, is that it looks like something we want to go forward to, but not until we get a legal opinion, so we don't end up in a lawsuit or whatever that. So if we have the money and we have the consensus to do it, but we want to hold off until we've taken care of any legal issues, got the Mr. Hawley involved in that.
Okay.
Is that what I'm hearing, Mr. Cox?
I'm for moving forward with annexation of both sites. The one in question, the larger one, it looks like there may be an easement issue one way or the other. The city owns the property. Annexing shouldn't change that condition.
It wouldn't.
No, it's going.
But
It
it's
would.
still an issue that needs to be resolved, but us annexing isn't gonna affect that.
No, it wouldn't be the same right on. What I suggested about the right of way is that you see if you can't get them to come up here and meet with us.
Yes, sir, that's what we're working on.
And-
I have sent numerous documentation and requested a physical meeting.
And let 'em- and Mr. Steele, I know that he's
Mhm.
involved, he knows them.
Yes, sir.
So, gentlemen, can we say that we have a consensus to move forward if all the concerns that Ms. Holly has are met?
Well, I don't think that's got anything to do with the annexation.
Well, not the annexation, but if we're gonna end up in
you're-
a lawsuit after the annexation because of the right of way, it wouldn't make any sense to spend the money ahead of time.
Well, you can be in a lawsuit before you annex it, because you're the owner of the property, so either way, that could happen, it's not gonna change anything. You're subject to it.
Bring it up to the table.
Let's annex.
Yes, Mr. Cox?
I'm for moving forward with annexation. Period.
Okay, heard that. Mr. Faircloth, you?
That's not me. I was just concerned about the cost. I'm not having any objection for annexing.
Okay, Mr. Hayes?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Like I said, we're looking at as the funding. So I'm for taking the funding from contingency fund to cover this expense.
Mr. Parker, you have any?
I'm in favor of that. We're looking at the $10,250.
Yes, sir.
So be it.
All right, you have a consensus to move forward the funding from contingency money.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's move on to 6B, rezoning the downtown mixed-use district.
Gentlemen, this was part of the requirements of the recent evaluation and appraisal review by the state of our comprehensive plan, was to pull our downtown mixed-use area into compliance. Unfortunately, the downtown area has never been in compliance with the comprehensive plan in the zoning because of their front setbacks. At one time, the only building in compliance was Hideaway Pizza. Now, we have recently had 12 parcels that have come into rezoning by the owners. They have rezoned 9 of them into C2, which is adequate, and they have had 3 that have utilized the new zoning, downtown mixed-use zoning, in order to have residential on those establishments, which the most common one you will know would be the Casbah Coffee. They were one of the first to come downtown mixed use in order to have residential on their second floor for the students at FAMU. There's approximately 150 different property owners in the district, and as required by the state, we would need, and our own code, we would need to send a certified letter to each one, hold an advertised public workshop that would be scheduled for those property owners. Typical rezoning requires public notice signs to be posted, an advertised LPA meeting. It requires an ordinance to be prepared, advertised, and processed through 2 council meetings. The estimated cost of this rezoning would run between $2,200 and $2,600, depending on the direct expense of the mailings and the advertising. We try to group all certified mailings. If a person owns multiple parcels, we only elaborate one mailing and list all their properties in one mailing, instead of mailing the 6, 8, 10 mailings as a practice from the Okaloosa County. So, and another one. I brought forth your information.
Comments, questions? Mr. Hayes?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. As we all know that we approved some time back for them to have multi-living or business below and living above that if it meets a requirement. Right now, except for the ones, cash bond or what, other ones would be in non-compliance anyway, so we're doing a disservice by granting them the ability to do certain things, but then by a code, they can't do it anyway, so.
That's right.
We're sending mixed signals to our constituents and the business owners. We let you do something, but then the way our code is, because it's not non-compliant for you to do that, then you can't do it anyway. Oh, excuse me. So,
I caught most of it in my notebook.
That's a common sense thing to me, in my common sense. Everybody doesn't have my type of sense, because sometimes they go crazy. But this is for me personally, it's a no-brainer. So I would be for doing the $2,200 to $2,600 and getting us in compliance. We know what we're trying to do downtown in some of the areas. That's all, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
It's all right.
Yes, Mr. Cox.
I'm for moving forward with updating the comprehensive plan affecting these parcels. And one question, do you have these funds available, or
No, sir.
then we call on contingency funds to accomplish this?
You in agreement, Mr. Fairclough?
Yes, sir.
Moving ahead, Mr. Blocker?
I was listening.
You have a consensus?
Thank you, sir.
Now we're on to, let's see, on nuisance.
The
Yeah.
nuisance abatement code.
Nuisance abatement code.
Yes, sir.
They're gonna stop me from being a nuisance, is that it?
Generally, public nuisance abatement involves issues of properties such as drugs, prostitution, domestic violence, squatters, and trash accumulation. And it is a fast-growing area within the policing and code enforcement departments. Well, most of our nuisance would lie in the sort of the trash accumulation and structures, which would be unsafe structures or dilapidated structures. The abatement is usually uses building codes, fire codes, zonings, and they use that in order to resolve the quality of life and life safety issues for our neighborhoods and our community areas. Recently, you all received, when we were in the CRA quarterly meeting and we were discussing the master plan for the downtown area, it was actually mentioned, this nuisance abatement code was actually mentioned there. And I'm presenting it here to you tonight for your review. Growth management is rapidly approaching the first draft of your land development regulations. And we just need direction from the council in order to tread on some of the more sensitive areas. We need to know if the council wishes us to explore and analyze the avenue of redefining Chapter 24, Code Enforcement Citations, and Chapter 38, your Health and Sanitation, into a more direct and enforceable language, clear, concise, precise procedures, and together with appropriate fines and penalties. And this is be part of what would establish a precedence where we can help us eliminate the blight and bring our unsafe structures and our physical threats to the public safety and health under control. Now, because the code, Chapter 24, actually ties with several of our Chapter 38. It also ties into State Statute 162 that we've adopted. There will be some research in order to give you a true evaluation of what in our code would need to be changed, altered, or analyzed. So it's just generally a question before you. Do you want me to our department to take the time, do the required analysis, present you a summarized draft to the council prior to inserting any of this in our code revision that's ongoing? Or is this something you want just to hold off venue until we complete our revisions and not address the element of nuisance at this time? So I just need to know what the council thinks before I go expending staff time.
Ms. Fairclough, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have several questions. I don't know if I should use the time here to do that when I can see Teresa, but I'd like to see a draft of the entire ordinance.
Well, I think that's the proposal, is that she will use this created draft and bring it to us.
Yeah.
But there are, I would like to see us have an ordinance where we can do something with these ugly, dilapidated buildings. And if we have to, we have an ordinance, but we don't have an ordinance with some teeth. If like, for instance, it lists the fines and the monetary fine and how it would progress after each offense. But then you get to the point of $500, then what? And how often can the code inspector issue citations if they don't comply? That's the kind of stuff we need to address. We need to give it an end. We need to give it a satisfaction to the city element. And one other little thing, on section 24-3, form of citation, just to note there, I don't know if you're going to use this as an official document or whatever, but second line there, shall constitute notice than an officer.
You're on 24-3 of the Crestview area?
Yeah, the one in our book here. Page 1, or also it's 22 of 57, section 24-3, form of citation.
Okay.
The second line there, shall constitute notice than an officer has probable cause. Shouldn't that be that?
Should be.
Okay.
I guess when they put it in 2006, they didn't proofread it.
Okay, that's all, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Fairclough.
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. Hayes.
I'm in favor of the process that they analyze this and present a summary draft to the council for review prior to insertion within the code revision. And the reason being, as we, or most of us know, there's some things around here that not really make our cities look that great. They've been here for years, some of them. We haven't had anything really that we can really do with it until we get something on the books. Someone will never do anything with it. They'll let it sit there and fall down, maybe on somebody's kid or whatever playing in that. But even if they don't, it doesn't help the beautification of our city and what we're trying to do for it. We're trying to improve our city overall, not just one section of it or whatever. I mean, that's what I'm looking for. And I don't want my neighbor with 3 or 4 cars, junk cars parked in their yard. In my yard, next to my yard is their yard, and people say, well, I can do with my property. Yeah, as long as it enhances the city. We can walk a block, 2 blocks from right here where we are now, and we can see what's going on. And it shouldn't be like that. If somebody just happens to come to the city hall and they decide to drive down 2 blocks and see what they see there, I know I would think twice about wanting to stay here. And I think it's our responsibility as elected officials to try to do something to improve that. So I'm ready. I'm in favor of them, and I know it's not a motion, but that they do the required analysis and present a summary. And they'll present it to us, and then we look at it, and then we'll have an opportunity to say, well, we don't think that's best for our citizens, or that's good. Leave this in, leave that out. But it's not where they're going to bring us a concrete thing says you gotta take this. We're the ones that are gonna make the decision of the things that we want in there and the things you want. And the fines, if there be fines and how much and what happens if they don't pay the fines, I'm sure they will address that, and then we'll look at it and think if it's fair and appropriate for our citizens.
Any other comments? Hey, Mr. Cox.
Yes, I don't think we should be kicking the can down the road any longer on this. I agree with Mr. Hayes that you should task utilizing some of the information in the Panama City Beach code. This looks pretty extensive, and there's 32 pages I think you provided us. They obviously have a very workable code. I want to mention it does reference city manager several times, so we're not there yet. But I think you should task getting us a workable document in a reasonable time frame.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, I noticed one thing in there, and I think it's a good idea, is a code enforcement officer. Here it rather than the code enforcement board, because we always have trouble keeping a board. They go in here and they go in yonder. A code enforcement officer would be somebody that you retain to do it, and they would probably be an attorney or something like that, or a former judge that's retired. Some of them do that, but they've got a lot more knowledge about what they're doing than that board does. And you don't have, once you get it that way, you don't have to worry about the board going away. I mean, just quit.
Good point. Ms. Blocker.
I mentioned several weeks ago about, yes, we need to review these ordinances, especially involving our code enforcement, citations, etc. I don't want no alleged violation. Let's go back, review, research all these ordinances, what we've got. Come back with an ordinance, amended, whatever necessary, being fair with our property owners, period. And therefore, first and foremost, educate the property owners what is forthcoming. But we're going to put some teeth in this ordinance, like I said, to eliminate this blight, clean up our town. But let's do it in a step, in an order that's fair to everyone. We've got to move with it. But I believe that we should be fair to all property owners, code enforcement, everything. Educate the people.
Thank you. Ms. Faircloth.
One other thing I neglected to mention that I wanted to is that Mr. Harley mentioned that it's a code enforcement officer.
Well, I don't know if that's a term.
Well,
But a code enforcement officer is one that's out enforcing it.
okay, and the chief may be able, police chief may be able to correct me on this if I'm wrong, but if this code enforcement person
It's an official.
doesn't have any official capacity as an enforcement officer, like a police officer does when he writes a citation for somebody running a stop sign, then the court's not going to want to handle it. I understand this is all civil, okay, and not criminal, but you've got to have some kind of ability to enforce.
Keep in mind, when I mentioned that ours is based out of State Statute 162, that allows for a court enforcement board. Your Panama City Beach did not adopt that state statute as their momentum in order to create their code enforcement and their rules and regulations that they follow. So you're looking at two different systems, each enforcing the rights that they thought best for their municipality. We're under State Statutes 162 and our Code Chapter 70, 38, and 24. Whereas, like I say, Panama City Beach are not rendering under that. They're rendering under their own velocity as a code enforcement official and they have granted them certain rights and certain abilities in order to enforce the law as passed by the municipality.
Okay, well, there's I always look at the worst possible scenario and try to head that off at the pass before it happens, okay? So let's just say that there is a violator owns a piece of property, and he's been cited 3 times, and he's up to a $500 fine, and he still refuses to pay it. So we take him to court. The county court judge orders him to pay it. Now, in the civil infraction, he can't send him to jail. All he can do is order him to pay it again. And if he still doesn't want to, is there a point to where we can just go in there, bulldozer, and knock the property down?
Most avenues that the city's used before is actually putting liens on the property, and it's been several months ago where we actually collected on one that was payable, not on the person's property, but on property that they actually inherited, and they could not probate out without them paying and settling the fine and fees with the city of
All
Crestview.
right, that'll work. Last final question, Mr. President. We've been operating under a complaint-driven system, to my knowledge. Are we aware that the officer could be the complainant? The code enforcement officer can be the complainant. If he's riding down Main Street and he sees a building that appears to be a nuisance because it's collecting vermin and trash and a possibility of vandals going in and starting a fire and burning down 2 or 3 blocks.
In the Crestview system, your code enforcement officer would report to your building official, who would have to deem that it was unsafe, and they would meet with the fire marshal in order to have an on-the-ground inspection of that particular property. And it would be up to the building official and the fire marshal to deem that it was an unsafe for building, and therefore be able to post it.
So my point being, would somebody have to call your office or the mayor's office or somebody in the city and say, I want to report a nuisance building? Then, and only then, can we send a code enforcement person out there to check on? Or can the code enforcement ride around town and see a house that with the roof has fallen in 25 years ago and deem that with it all grown up, and deem that himself or herself as a nuisance structure?
They do ride around and they do see unsafe buildings. But as I said, the only teeth that you allow your code enforcement officers to do is report that possible violation, to the building official. The building official and the fire marshal would have to go out and gain entry to the building in order to deem whether it is unsafe and what to do to take care of the problem. It may simply be, as it was in a local one here just recently, was that they had to secure the building. And if the building is secure from entry, according to your building code, that may be all it takes.
Well, if you've got a good definition for nuisance property, nuisance structure, nuisance animal, nuisance whatever, then your code inspector or person, whatever term we're going to use, should have enough ammo under that definition to take care of it, his or herself, without having to go through this line of red tape. If a police officer sees somebody run a stop sign, he doesn't have to go report it to the chief, and then the chief go out there and sit and watch that intersection to see if anybody runs a stop sign.
Because he has laws in place to facilitate that.
The tearing down a building is a lot different than that, and if you don't, you can face all kind of lawsuits about tearing down buildings, and you need to make sure that you've got a procedure that will meet the criteria of the law. Otherwise, you don't just go out and tear down buildings. They belong to somebody.
I'm not suggesting that the code enforcement person go out and start getting a sledgehammer and start knocking down buildings. I'm suggesting that he or she would have the authority to identify on their own, using the nuisance property building, whatever statute or ordinance, to issue a citation.
Now, a citation is different than, and we're getting into explaining a little things that are rolling into confusion.
Okay.
Okay. Our officers at this time have to abide with the written city code as affected in Chapter 38 and Chapter 24, which means they're as complaint driven. They can respond to abandoned vehicles, excessive overgrowth of land, landscaping, debris, any of your violations such as with refrigerators or such as that, which are unlawful by state statute. That's what the officers you have at this time are allowed to do. It's what they're trained to do. They have been qualified and tested for this. And at that point in time, that's all you have granted them in the code to be able to do.
And that's what we're doing, is changing it.
Yes, sir. We're changing it. And we want the ability to research all avenues. The Panama City Beach nuisance abatement code is one fashion that we could revise it to. We could also, a few months ago, we talked about the property maintenance code. That's another avenue that handles buildings in a different way. We would like the board to grant us the time to analyze and compare the different ways in order to bring you back something that would be allowed where we could have clear, concise procedures and enforceable language incorporated into whatever you pass in order to meet the demands of the current needs of the blighted areas of our city.
Teresa, you're going to need to get Mr. Shirley involved on that.
Yes, sir, we will.
Mr. Hayes, you had some?
She just basically answered it, and just for some of my fellow members, once we see the summary, then in my opinion that would be time to start asking the questions that we have considered. Right now, we're in this discussion of what's current going on.
Yeah, I think what's going on is people just kind of give guidance. Here's what we'd like to see while you're doing the revision. But what I see is you have a consensus to go ahead and bring us a draft of what you want to do. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yes, sir. That's fine.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Teresa, you're still with us. Schedule of land development code updates.
This is my night. Okay. You know, we have so many items that are vying for our council's time over the summer, in addition to regular business items. So it would be advantageous to ask the council how they wish for these revisions to be presented and scheduled out. We need, whatever you dictate here will dictate how it schedules through the local planning agency, through our public hearing process with the general public, and sets us up for how the comprehensive plan and the land development plan will be, the revisions will be completed for that. There are 23 articles in simply Chapter 102. And we are actually combining some of those. We're splitting some of them. And we're utilizing a process in order to make them more clear, concise, and simplistic. We like streamlined. However, there are several urgent portions of the code that really need to be addressed as soon as possible. So rather than running with the numeric listing of the articles, which in the past that's sort of how you would have looked at them, and then review the entire document upon completion, we would like to prioritize the ones that have the most current pressing issues. The documentation would be prepared and presented to the council in a timely fashion. Then it could actually be incorporated into the revision that we're running with. And it may have to be tweaked to allow for the continuity to flow through the entire document. We would like I said, our goal is to streamline the processes and procedures, simplify the existing verbiage, and still secure the validity of the laws and ordinances as adopted by the city of Crestview.
There's one ordinance that, to me, is more urgent than any of them. It's a sign ordinance.
Sign.
It's completely contrary to federal law.
Yes.
If you get sued, you get sued in federal court, and if you lose, which you probably will, you end up paying their attorney's fee and yours. Now, there are experts in that area
Yes, sir.
that Teresa would have to contact that could draw up that to comply with all the federal requirements.
We've actually been working in a draft that in conjunction with Mr. Shirley.
Mr. Hayes, you have a comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. President, thank you. I'm in agreement with their request, and they stated that some things we need to address right away. And so I would say that we've hired a competent person that runs that department, that we give them authority to prioritize if they think which is best for the city. If we have any disagreements, we can come to them and say, well, this is why, in my opinion, this is more important. If the council majority says that's more important than what you're working on, we can always redirect them. But I have confidence that our growth management department would do the right thing. If not, we are here to govern to make sure they do.
Any other comments, questions? I would just say I think it's an excellent idea because there are so many articles, 23 of them that you have to do. We've identified some recently that really need to be looked at, and so I think they should be moved up to the top priority. I'm hearing that from Mr. Hayes and Ms. Fairclough. You agree with that?
Yes.
Mr. Blocker? Mr. Cox? All right, you've got a consensus here. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your time, Teresa. And at this time, I will open up the floor to anybody in the audience who would like to make any remarks. Please approach the podium this time. We'll listen to you. Anybody in the audience like to make any remarks? Yeah. Looks like Mr. Kell from WAAZ is approaching the podium.
Amazingly, I have been reading in the last year some of the documents you're now looking at from Panama City Beach. Some of you may be aware that I was considering becoming a part owner of a radio station in Panama City. So over the past almost year, I've made, I think, about 30 trips, 2 or 3 days. I probably have 500 hours of driving around, looking at places, over 50 buildings I looked at and checked out. And as a result, I wound up meeting with the planning officials of Panama City Beach, Panama City, and Bay County, all of whom were eager to get a new business to come to their area. And very cooperative, good folks. But they have the similar thing. The ordinance that you're just looked at on code enforcement from Panama City Beach, that's a town of 12,000. Panama City at 36,000 and the county at 186,000 are all very similar. But the main thing I can say is from having driven miles down there, I think I've driven every mile of waterfront road my GPS could get me to looking for places down there. The results are obvious. You don't see junky places anywhere I drove. I mean, I saw some houses. Yeah, they weren't real fancy, but I never saw in any, even from Callaway and Springfield, cars up on blocks, on concrete blocks. So you're going in the right direction looking at what they have done, and I'm sure your League of Cities will give you more good ideas. But it's working, not far from here.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any comments from Mayor, City Council?
Yes, sir. I'd like to mention just, it was a good day from things that I've heard around the city. I had an extended meeting with the Walmart officials this morning, and talking about some negotiation things about them building their new store in North Crestview, and they got off into the subject of the city of Crestview and how happy they were to find how business friendly this city was. My. Isn't that great to hear? They specifically talked about some department heads they were working with, like Wayne Steele and Teresa Gaylord, about how great this city was to work with, one of the best that they have worked with, about being business friendly. And I was real glad to hear that. Some people don't know what they're talking about, evidently. Now, some more good news today is that had an unusual situation that's happened here from the Florida Retailers Federation. I don't know whether you announced that before I come in late, but I've known about this one for a few days. It was only announced this afternoon that the Florida Retailers Federation has given out a couple of awards, and the 2017 Florida Retailer of the Year is Mike Carroll in Hub City Smokehouse. Major award. And I just found about this one a little while ago, is that April Meyer with Positively Scrumptious was granted an award of Florida Outstanding Retailer. And so those are two awards from the same small city, which is unusual that happens. And so I just say congratulations to them from the city, and I think we're very proud. It's tough being a small business owner, and they're making an impact, and can be an inspiration to other business retailers around the city. But that was my good news today. I like to share the good news. We won't go into about the dog odors story that I had when I was eating my lunch on Saturday, and about the dog odor that was running a neighborhood, but I'm going to pass that over to Teresa.
Madam Clerk, do you have anything for us?
I did put out a notice about the weekend events. Saturday is the May Day Parade. If you are going to participate on the float in May Day, Mr. Steele will have an escort here. Line-up's at 9:30. Line-up's at 9, but the parade doesn't step off till 10, so there's no sense in standing down there in the heat for an hour, personally. So we'll be leaving here no later than 9:30, and also the Memorial Day ceremony at Live Oak Park. I have ordered a new wreath. Get rid of our crappy little purple wreath, and we'll be doing that at 10 o'clock on Monday at Live Oak Cemetery.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, you have anything?
No, sir. Thank you.
Chief, you have anything?
No, sir.
Marie, you have anything?
No, sir.
Chief, you have anything?
No, sir.
Teresa, you spoke enough. No, do you have, do you have anything?
I would just like to extend thank you to Brenda Smith, who nominated his retail persons, 3 of the Crestview businesses, and we come out with 2 of them being fake bidders. So
That's great news. Great way to end the meeting. Meeting's adjourned.